The carbon bill's passage through the lower house this morning. Labor's got a deal to lock into legislation a 43% emissions cut by 2030, and the Greens have had their win, making it a floor, not a ceiling. Will this end the climate wars as the PM hopes? I doubt it. But what it does do, as we've seen firsthand overseas, is put Australia's energy security at grave risk, because our country is now locked into losing 60% of its coal-fired power stations, currently generating more than 60% of our electricity, within 8 years. With no plan to replace this power, other than more and more renewables, which give us nothing when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. We're going to talk a little later about Senator Molan's terrifying new book on China. And here we are today celebrating a bill to make us more energy vulnerable than ever at a time when our regional security hasn't been this dire since the end of the Second World War. So why are we doing it? All because of Australia's less than or around 1% contribution to the world's so-called climate emergency. But what about the report today on the state of the Great Barrier Reef, usually Exhibit A in the climate catastrophe debate? According to the Australian Institute of Marine Science, coral cover on the Great Barrier Reef is at a record high. A record high. As the marine science body reports, hard coral now extends over 2/3 of the reef's 2,500 kilometre length. This is the best result, it says, in 36 years of monitoring. But you wouldn't know it from the climate crisis headline in the Sydney Morning Herald, which cried, "Reef report piles pressure on Labor targets." Right at the end, in paragraph 12 of the Herald's 14-paragraph story, it admits that the Institute has recorded the highest levels of coral cover in the southern reef since surveys began 36 years ago, but warns these gains could quickly be reversed because of climate change. Seriously. But here we are with a legislative requirement on its way through the Parliament that will force us to get emissions down by almost 50% in just 8 years, and then net zero, of course, by 2050. So if we are going to do it and keep the economy going, we've got to look urgently at nuclear power. It's the only proven form of zero emissions baseload power. If the Prime Minister can't help himself mocking it.
Putting the member for Fairfax in charge of a review on nuclear power bears an uncanny resemblance to Mr Burns putting Homer Simpson in charge of nuclear power safety. No one loves a reactor like a reactionary, which is no wonder they're so obsessed by nukes over there.
It's got a good laugh there, didn't it, from his parliamentary cheer squad, but come on. The PM says nuclear is too expensive. But it's not too expensive in France, which gets 70% of its power from nuclear, or any of the other 32 countries that use it, often, of course, with Australia's uranium. And it's not as if the taxpayers aren't already wasting billions and billions on so-called cheap renewables. It's all good and well to crow today about cutting emissions, but if we compromise our energy security, to me, that's too big a price to pay.